Thomas Alive Today presents
10 Defunct Dead Restaurants. Lum's was an American family restaurant chain based in Florida with additional locations in several states. It was founded in 1956 in Miami Beach, Florida, by Stuart and Clifford S. Perlman when they purchased Lum's hot dog stand for $10,000. Over the next few years, the Perlman brothers opened 3 additional Lum's restaurants to 4 by 1961. Clifford Perlman, in addition to owning Lum's, had been serving as the president of Southernwood Industries Incorporated, resigned the position to work full-time. Under the brothers, Lum's began aggressively expanding and franchising. The signature item was hot dogs steamed in beer. In 1969, Lum's Incorporated was admitted to the New York Stock Exchange. Lum's Incorporated purchased the 500-room Caesars Palace for $60 million in 1969. Lum's was sold in 1971 to John E. Brown, then chairman of Kentucky Fried Chicken. The company owned and franchised 400 stores in the continental U.S., Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Europe. Brown sought to improve the menu and searched America for the perfect hamburger. In 1971, Brown bought Ollie Glacienhouse's Ollie Burger recipe for $1 million, along with stock in the new company and a 10-year contract for $50,000 a year to appear as the official spokesperson on behalf of Lum's. In 1978, Wienerwald Holdings, AG, a Swiss holding company and parent of the Wienerwald restaurant chain, under the direction of Friedrich Jahn, purchased the 273-restaurant chain from Brown. Wienerwald had overextended itself and was forced into bankruptcy in 1982. 2 Jahn-controlled Lum's franchises of 70 were closed and filed for bankruptcy. Horns was a Southern-style restaurant chain located primarily in the southeast and southern United States along major highways. It was headquartered in Bayard, Florida. At the chain's peak there were over 60 locations, but today only one original restaurant remains. Many restaurant locations feature diner-style sit-down service as well as lodging, Texaco gas stations, gift shops, and an ice cream bar, creating a one-stop shop atmosphere. Since many locations were on highways, many Horns restaurants were open 24/7. By the late 1970s, highway travel became less profitable for the chain and it began to lose business. On April 29, 1980, Key Energy Enterprises acquired 6 Horns locations in Florida. In 1981, the Atlantic National Bank took over Horns International Incorporated, ending the Horns chain. In 1982, the last company-owned restaurant closed. By 1986, the trademark on Horns Motor Lodge restaurant had expired. Bill Knapps was an American family restaurant chain. It was founded by Clinton B. Knapp in Battle Creek, Michigan, in 1948. The chain operated in Michigan, Ohio, Florida, Illinois, and Indiana, with more than 60 locations at its peak. This overhaul of the chain's demographics, however, proved unsuccessful. Loyal diners felt alienated by the changes made. Abandonment of Mr. Knapp's from-scratch philosophy drove these loyal customers away for good. Furthermore, the campaign failed to recruit the younger family crowd, resulting in further eroding customer base. Another reason for the shift away from the made-from-scratch philosophy was a listeria outbreak in the early 1990s. As the restaurant struggled to recover from the negative publicity, many new, updated food safety standards were initiated. Some food preparation that was taking place in the restaurants had to be moved back to the commissaries, to be monitored more closely. This was not as cost-effective, as more foods needed to be processed and frozen to ensure safety. As commissary costs continued to rise, more of Bill Knapp's signature foods had to be outsourced to larger processing facilities. By 2000, the commissaries were becoming little more than distribution centers. Fresh, handmade hamburger patties were replaced by frozen, eggs by a powdered substitute, and even the marinated chicken breasts were coming in frozen packages. While the organization elevated food safety standards, higher costs combined with lower quality led the chain to its ultimate downfall on May 21, 2002 when it files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and closed at the end of that year. Chi-Chi's was founded in 1975 in Richfield, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, by restaurateur Marno McDermott and former Green Bay Packers player Max McGee. McDermott had previously founded the Zapata fast food Mexican chain, which later became Xanago. From 1977 to 1986, the chain was run by former KFC executive Shelley Frank. When Frank took leadership, the chain moved its headquarters to his hometown of Louisville. By March 1995, the chain had grown to 210 locations. Chi-Chi's last owner while the company was still in business in the United States and Canada was Prandium Incorporated, which had filed for bankruptcy several times, including in 1993 as Restaurant Enterprises Group Incorporated and again in 2002 as Prandium. On October 8, 2003, Chi-Chi's and Koo-Koo-Roo, another Prandium subsidiary, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy themselves. In November 2003, a month after filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Chi-Chi's was hit with the largest hepatitis A outbreak in American history, with at least 4 deaths and 660 other victims of illness in the Pittsburgh area, including high school students who caught the disease from the original victims. The hepatitis was traced back to green onions at the Chi-Chi's at Beaver Valley Mall near Monaca, Pennsylvania, about 30 miles northwest of Pittsburgh. Chi-Chi's settled the hepatitis A lawsuits by July 2004. At the time the suits were settled, Chi-Chi's had only 65 restaurants, fewer than half of the number of 4 years prior. In August 2004, Outback Steakhouse bid $42.5 million for the rights to buy its choice of Chi-Chi's 76 properties, but did not purchase the Chi-Chi's name, operations, or recipes. On the weekend of September 18, 2004, Chi-Chi's closed all 65 of its remaining restaurants. The Red Barn Restaurant was a fast food restaurant chain founded in 1961 in Springfield, Ohio, by Don Six, Martin Levine, and Jim Kirst. In 1963, the small chain was purchased by Richard O. Kearns, operated as Red Barn System, with the offices moving briefly to Dayton, Ohio and in August 1964 to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. During the late 1960s, United Servomation, also called Servomation, bought the Red Barn chain. In 1978, United Servomation merged with the City Investing Company's GDV division, which also owned the Motel 6 motel chain. Only interested in real estate, construction, and financial services, the new owner ceased advertising for the chain, along with allowing the franchise leases to expire, with the last of the leases expiring around 1988. At its peak, Red Barn had 300 to 400 restaurants in 19 states, as well as outlets in southern Ontario, elsewhere in Canada, and Australia. Following the shutdown of operations, most of the Red Barn buildings were converted for other uses. A few of the chain restaurants were renamed The Farm in various states and continued serving the same menu items available when they were under their Red Barn franchise. There were 2 locations under the Farm name in Racine, Wisconsin, and Bradford, Pennsylvania that served the same menu items. The Bradford location closed for a brief period in 2014 from a small fire and permanently closed in December 2015. The Racine, Wisconsin store closed on February 2, 2020. The Australian Red Barn stores were sold and converted into McDonald's locations. Burger Chef was an American fast food restaurant chain. It began operating in 1954 in Indianapolis, Indiana by Frank and Donald Thomas, expanded throughout the United States, and at its peak in 1973 had 1,050 locations, including some in Canada, was surpassed only by McDonald's 1,600. The chain featured several signature items, such as the Big Chef and Super Chef hamburgers and Works Bar, where customers added their own toppings to hamburgers. Burger Chef spread across the United States, following a strategy of opening outlets in smaller towns. In 1982, General Foods sold Burger Chef to the Canadian company Amasco, which also owned Hardee's, for $44 million. Amasco converted many locations to Hardee's restaurants and let franchises and locations near existing Hardee's locations convert to other brands. Remaining restaurants that did not convert to Hardee's or new names and branding simply closed. The final restaurant to carry the Burger Chef name closed in 1996. The first Gino's was opened in Dundalk, Maryland, just outside Baltimore. It got its official name in 1959 when the owners Joe Campanella, Louis Fisher, and Alan Amici invited Colts captain Gino Marchetti to become a partner. In 1967, Gino's merged with Tops Drive-In, a chain of 18 drive-in restaurants located in the Washington, D.C. area. Most Tops locations were rebranded as Gino's. In the early 1970s, the company attempted to expand from its mid-Atlantic base into the Midwest. However, these locations only operated a short period. Gino's also expanded into Massachusetts and Connecticut. There it had difficulties because Gino Marchetti was a relative unknown in the region. Additionally, people confused them with the Papa Gino's pizza chain that was based in Massachusetts. These locations were eventually closed and many now house other chains, especially Burger King. Gino's also converted some to fish restaurants, but these two failed. Another notable facet of Gino's was fried chicken. In the Mid-Atlantic area, it was the franchisee of KFC which was co-branded with Gino's Hamburgers. In New England, another company was the KFC franchisee. Gino's still sold chicken but it was made with a different seasoning from the KFC one. The chain had 359 company-owned locations when the Marriott Corporation acquired it in 1982. Marriott discontinued the brand and converted locations to its Roy Rogers Restaurants chain. The last Gino's, located in Pasadena, Maryland and owned independently from Marriott, closed in 1986. A new group of restaurants under the Gino's name, involving some of the principals of the original chain, was started in 2010. Sambo's was an American restaurant chain, started in 1957 by Sam Battistone Sr. and Newell Bonnet in Santa Barbara, California. Though the name was taken from portions of the names of its two founders, the chain also associated with the story of Little Black Samba. Battistone and Bonnet capitalized on this connection by decorating the walls of the restaurants with scenes from the book, including a dark-skinned boy, tigers, and a pale, magical unicycle-riding man called the Tree Friend. By the early 1960s, the illustrations depicted a light-skinned boy wearing a jeweled Indian-style turban with the tigers. A kids' club, Samba's Tiger Tamers, later called the Tiger Club, promoted the chain's family image. The chain filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November 1981. All locations except for the first in Santa Barbara either closed outright or were renamed after being purchased, effectively ending the chain's existence. The Santa Barbara restaurant continued business under the Samba's name until 2020, when it was renamed to Chad's after its owner at the time, Chad Stevens. The George Floyd protests against racism in the United States resulted in the owner of the restaurant changing the name of the establishment. John E. Sachs and Thomas E. Sachs started White Tower Hamburgers after investigating various White Castle locations, observing operations and hiring a White Castle operator. The first location opened near Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. By the end of 1927, there were 6 locations in Milwaukee and Racine, Wisconsin. In 1929, White Tower put 30 locations in Detroit alone. Despite the Depression, White Tower expanded to 130 locations. White Tower placed many of its restaurants near train and trolley stops. In 1941, White Tower Management Corporation moved its headquarters to 6 Suburban Avenue, Stamford, Connecticut. At its peak in the mid-1950s, the chain had 230 stores in several states. It tested the Tower-O-Matic automated restaurant in the 1950s and 60s with little success. It also attempted a sit-down restaurant called Marbit's. Many later suburban White Tower restaurants featured curb service with car hops. Brock Sachs took over as president of White Tower Management Corporation in 1970 from his father, T. E. Sachs, when the latter retired. Brock changed the name of White Tower Corporation to Tom Brock Corporation on the corporation's 50th anniversary, as it also owns a chain of steakhouses called Brock's. With the migration of people to the suburbs and most of the White Tower locations in the city, by 1979 only 80 Tom Brock Corporation-owned locations remained. Tom Brock Corporation branched out into franchising Burger King's and Golden Skillet Chicken. Today, Tom Brock Corporation, having exited the restaurant business as an operator, is a real estate investment and management company based in New Canaan, Connecticut. The company's trademark expired in 2005. Coon Chicken Inn was an American chain of 3 restaurants that was founded by Max and Lester Graham and Adelaide Bird in 1925, which prospered until the late 1950s. The restaurant's name contained the word coon, considered a racial slur, and the trademarks and entrances of the restaurants were designed to look like a smiling caricature of an African-American porter. The smiling capped porter head also appeared on menus, dishes, and promotional items. Due to changes in popular culture and the general consideration of being culturally and racially offensive, the chain was closed by 1957. The first Coon Chicken Inn was opened in suburban Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1925. In 1929, another restaurant was opened in then suburban Lake City, Seattle, and a third was opened in the Hollywood district of Portland, Oregon, in 1931. A fourth location was advertised but never opened in Spokane, Washington. Later, a cabaret, orchestra, and catering were added to the Seattle and Salt Lake restaurants. The Portland location at 5474 Knee Sandy Boulevard closed in 1949 and was converted into another restaurant, and is currently the location of Clyde's Prime Rib. The Seattle location also closed in 1949 and is no longer standing. That address at 8500 Lake City Way is now occupied by the Growler Guys restaurant. The Salt Lake City location at 2960 South Highland Drive closed in 1957 and is now the site of a furniture store.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.